There are easier ways to get out of a bad review than keeling over mid-monologue. But that's exactly what happened to Darren Blake. Local actor, amateur spiritualist, and star of King of Ashes, who collapsed on stage halfway through Act 2, clutching his chest and dramatically whispering, "The fire knows." To be fair, those were his actual lines. The audience, ever eager for immersive theater, gave him a standing ovation as paramedics wheeled him off. That was the 7th death, not in the theater's entire history, just during productions of that play. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Also, drop a comment with your city and local time. That way, if any of you mysteriously vanish by Part 7, we'll have a convenient log. Anyway, as Darren's soul potentially hovered over his own Yelp review, the cast and crew stood frozen, again wondering the same thing. Why does every actor who plays the king die? Some people blame an old curse. Some blame the script. Others think the whole thing is an elaborate insurance fraud staged by theater-loving necromancers. A few folks even believe the theater itself is alive and hates method acting. Personally, I just think ghosts are drama queens. But let's rewind, way before Darren took his final bow, to a time when the only thing cursed in this theater was the lighting. Because this playhouse, it's older than it has any right to be. And just a friendly warning if your floorboards creak tonight. Maybe wait until daylight to check underneath them. Or don't check at all. Honestly, denial is underrated. Now, where were we? Oh yes, the fire knows. It was an unusually warm October evening in Marowak, a town small enough that the general store sold both eggs and taxidermy glue. The Marowak Playhouse stood at the edge of downtown, like a hunched figure in a top hat, its ornate iron marquee flickering even when the power grid was fine. Inside. The velvet seats smelled of dust and ghostly aftershave. Posters from past productions lined the walls. The Crucible, Macbeth, Grease, you know, the classics. But at the center, framed in cracked mahogany, was always King of Ashes, a fictional tragedy that somehow refused to stay fictional. When King of Ashes was first produced in 1864, nobody noticed anything weird. Sure, the original lead died a week before opening. But Victorian actors were known for 3 things: tuberculosis, dying artistically, and haunting their understudies. But then, the understudy died. So did the understudy's understudy. Finally, the director stepped into the role out of sheer frustration and promptly choked on a prop crown. The play was shelved for about 40 years, until, in 1906, a traveling troupe accidentally performed King of Ashes, thinking it was a gritty rewrite of Hamlet. Within 6 months, 3 leads had perished, and 1 lighting technician was reportedly eaten by shadows. The city council demanded the play be banned. It turns out nothing boosts ticket sales like whispers of cursed scripts and murdered leads. By the mid-20th century, dying on stage had become a weird badge of honor among risk-seeking actors. Some even auditioned using Ouija boards. A 1952 review in the Marowak Gazette read, "It was a haunting performance, though the screaming wasn't part of the script." That one earned a posthumous Tony, locally, in the form of a carved turnip. Still, the play kept coming back. Every decade or so, some bold soul tried again. Always the same 5 acts, 32 scenes, and a monologue in Act 2 that made the lights dim. Even when spoken off stage, Darren Blake had been warned, but he was also between gigs and wanted to impress a casting agent rumored to be attending. Cursed or not, he'd laughed. Dying on stage gets attention, which is probably true, especially when you do it 7 nights in a row. Different actors, same lines, same spot, same final whisper the fire knows. Authorities, naturally, investigated. Toxicology came back clean. Structural engineers found nothing dangerous beneath the stage, except a raccoon nest made of old programs and one extremely vintage handkerchief embroidered with the words, "We are still watching." The playhouse shut down, temporarily out of respect. Of course, not because of lawsuits. Definitely not because the fire inspector refused to enter the building without garlic and a crucifix. But here's where it gets weird, or weirder. The script of King of Ashes was never copyrighted. No one knows who wrote it. Every copy stored digitally deletes itself. Every physical copy is slightly different, though always handwritten in the same ornate script ink that glows faintly when wet. Modern scholars have tried to analyze the language. One professor suggested the syntax resembled a blend of Elizabethan English and a now extinct dialect from the Catalonian Pyrenees. Another insisted it contained embedded numerical sequences similar to those found in the Voynich manuscript. Both were later found sleepwalking on stage at the Merriwick Playhouse, muttering the line, "Crown me gently, O ash-made king." Neither remembered how they got there. A third academic simply said, "It's a bad play," and left academia altogether to open a sandwich shop. The shop later burned down. No cause was found. Just ash in the shape of a stage curtain. Now, before you panic and start wondering if listening to this story counts as inviting the curse, rest easy. Technically, you have to read the lines aloud in a theater built before 1900 while standing under a brass chandelier, so unless your bedroom is oddly specific, you're safe. Probably. In conclusion, Darren Blake was just the latest in a long line of theatrical tragedies. But he wouldn't be the last. Because as they say in Merriwick, the show must go on, even if the cast doesn't. The Merriwick Playhouse had more history than the town's public records, and definitely better penmanship. Built in 1839, the theater stood long before Merriwick was granted township status, or before anyone had agreed on whether plumbing was a necessity or a witch's trick. Local legend has it, the original blueprint was found etched on the back of a tavern bar stool during a thunderstorm, and the building itself was finished within 40 days by a crew that reportedly never aged. Whether that was true or the product of late-night ghost tours was anyone's guess, but one fact stood firm. The theater was older than everything else around it. It predated the firehouse, the church, and even the cemetery, which uncomfortably wrapped around its back wall like a shawl of tombstones. And yet, despite centuries of weather, neglect, and questionable performances of cats, the structure stood immaculately intact. Local architects would shake their heads, muttering about impossible stress tolerances and wood grain patterns that resist time decay. One particularly annoyed preservationist once said, "I don't care what kind of varnish they used, it's not supposed to glow under moonlight." She now teaches pottery in rural Canada. There were things about the building that simply refused to make sense. For example, the lights in the dressing room corridor flickered rhythmically, even when disconnected from the power grid, or how no two backstage mirrors ever reflected the same angle, or the perpetual scent of lavender and charcoal that wafted from the costume loft, even after full renovations. But most disturbing of all was the building's memory. In a town where records were kept loosely and birth certificates sometimes just said approximately spring, the theater remembered everything. Old playbills would mysteriously reappear even after being archived. Props from productions decades apart showed identical burn marks, and actors stepping onto the main stage for the first time would often say, "This feels familiar." Sometimes they'd claim to know lines before seeing the script. Other times, they'd finish monologues from different plays entirely. There's even a town archivist, Mrs. Eileen Thistle, who swears she saw her late husband's reflection in the box office glass. He died during a 1973 production of King Lear and was never particularly fond of the arts. Even dead, he's trying to sneak out early, she said, with a mix of fondness and exhaustion. Typical. But if the building remembered, then the stage itself recalled, and that was something else entirely. Actors who'd performed at other historic venues often compared stages to living beings, temperamental, hungry, sometimes generous. But the Merriwick stage had opinions. It creaked differently, depending on the performer. It whispered faint lines from older scripts under heavy boots. And if you listened closely during late-night rehearsals, you might hear the gentle scrape of applause coming from nowhere. Veteran tech crew refused to stand center stage alone. One once claimed the floorboards breathed. That particular claim sparked an academic debate among paranormal architects. Yes, it's a niche field about whether certain buildings might evolve emotional responses over time. The Merowick Playhouse was cited in 3 published papers and 1 discredited podcast. Interestingly, the one feature of the building that never aged was its velvet curtain, a deep blood wine red, with embroidery no one had ever been able to photograph clearly. In daylight, it shimmered like silk. In gaslight, it shimmered like something watching back. No one knew where it came from. It was never replaced, never cleaned, never folded. It just remained. The curtain, many believed, held secrets. One lighting designer claimed he once saw a set of initials stitched into the fabric, different from one night to the next. When he tried to take a closer look, the ladder collapsed under him. He left Merowick the next morning, muttering about patterns in red thread and the number 13. He also took the only existing blueprint of the playhouse with him. And so, for generations, the theater remained a strange, beautiful parasite at the center of town, a place where art was celebrated, applauded, and occasionally punished. Some townspeople avoided it altogether. Others embraced its weirdness, wearing I Survived Act 2 pins or holding candlelight tours that subtly hinted the ghosts were actors just waiting for better reviews. And yet, despite the rumors, deaths, and uncanny quirks, people kept coming back, because for all its strangeness, the Merowick Playhouse felt like theater. The heavy velvet smell, the seats that whispered when you sat, the kind of quiet before curtain rise that made you feel like you were standing at the edge of the world, waiting for the lights to flicker just once more. Of course, most playhouses don't keep a tombstone in the prop room, or a trap door that opens on Tuesdays, even when nailed shut. But maybe that's part of the charm, or the curse. Either way. As the modern-day crew prepared for another production this time, starring a fresh-faced actor named Darren Blake, they did so with a mix of reverence and gallows humor. Everyone knew the risks. Everyone knew the rumors. And still, the show went on. Because if there's one thing actors fear more than death, it's cancellation. As the marquee flickered overhead and the townspeople gathered beneath a dusty awning, no one noticed the velvet curtain twitch slightly. No one smelled the faint scent of lavender and burnt paper, and no one noticed the initials on the curtain had changed again. D.B. In fairness to the first guy who died, it wasn't entirely his fault. Jonathan Whitmore, Shakespearean thespian, casual absinthe enthusiast, and proud wearer of dramatic capes, was the original lead in the 1864 debut of King of Ashes. A grand reopening of the freshly finished Merowick Playhouse was in full swing, attended by every respectable hat-wearing citizen and a few less reputable mustache-twirling critics. Jonathan was slated to play King Aldrin, the tragic monarch who watches his kingdom crumble due to a prophecy he himself commissioned. Think Lear, but with more fire and a slightly unhealthy obsession with mirrors. Opening night arrived with fog, of course, an orchestra that had somehow tuned all their instruments a half-step flat, and a crow that wouldn't leave the chandelier. The townspeople called it atmospheric. The crow called it lunch. Jonathan, determined to impress, launched into his performance with bombastic fury. His Act 2 soliloquy, delivered under a dim blue spotlight, was hailed as electrifying by one surviving audience member. Then, just before the line, "Crown me gently, O Ashmaid King," he stumbled. Not a dramatic stumble, a real one. He fell headfirst into the orchestra pit, landing with a dull thud and a splash. There was no water. What there was, according to musicians who ran screaming, was a pile of rose petals. Dark, red, and soaking wet, as if plucked from a funeral bouquet that hadn't been watered in weeks. Jonathan's mouth was full of them. He was pronounced dead on the spot, and buried 3 days later with a velvet cape and an expression of mild surprise. The undertaker noted something strange. Jonathan's hands were badly burned, though no fire had touched him. The show, needless to say, did not go on, at least not for a while. The script was shelved, labeled unstable material, and locked in the Merowick archives. But curiosity lingers like smoke. Over the next decade, the play developed an underground following. Pages circulated secretly among theater students. A group of high school performers attempted a table read in a barn and claimed to hear stage directions whispered from the hayloft. One girl fainted during the second scene. She later said she dreamed of a crown made of bone and apology. The next recorded death occurred in 1872, when a traveling actor named Bastian Glimmer really performed excerpts from the script during a poetry night in Dover's pub. He collapsed mid-recital and burst into flames. Flames in a pub, with no open fire nearby. The bartender still refuses to talk about it. He just pours a double whenever someone mentions that flaming guy. Then came Eliza Ruthford, 1880. A brilliant actress with a knack for tragic roles and an unfortunate talent for attracting strange fan mail. She was rehearsing a monologue from King of Ashes when she began coughing uncontrollably. She choked, staggered, and fell against a mirror. When she was found, the mirror had cracked in perfect symmetry around her face, forming what looked like a crown of jagged silver shards. The coroner listed the cause of death as mirror-induced asphyxiation, which raised more questions than it answered. This string of actorly demises sparked what some call the first theatrical panic in American history. Local papers ran headlines like, "The Play That Bites Back" and "Script of Death Found in Church Donation Box." A traveling preacher held a bonfire to cleanse Merowick's sins. He invited townsfolk to burn their copies of King of Ashes. According to one witness, when the flames touched the pages, they let out a sound like clapping. Historical fact, there really was a rash of Victorian-era playhouses reporting unexplained actor injuries in the 1880s, including broken ankles, nosebleeds, and in one case, a swarm of bees during intermission. Some researchers attribute it to bad stage safety standards and heavy corsets. Others aren't so sure. A controversial study from the 1960s argues that theater-related superstition has statistically significant effects on the accident rate of performers. It's still cited today in the philosophical debate, can belief in a curse make the curse real? Eliza's death marked the beginning of a new era in the legend. No longer just an unlucky play. King of Ashes was whispered about with dread, like Macbeth's angry cousin who shows up late to dinner and insists on holding a séance. By the early 1900s, it became a rite of passage. To perform it was to flirt with death and fame. In fact, some actors wanted to be cast. They believed surviving it would mark them as elite, a kind of spiritual badge, an artistic hazing ritual. Others said the play could awaken a deeper part of your soul, like opening a door in your mind that might not close again. And yet, the pattern held. Every production, every lead, dead, but not instantly. Some died on stage. Others days later choked, burned, drowned in empty bathtubs. But always after delivering one key line, "Crown me gently, O ash-made king." No one could explain why that phrase seemed to echo even after the actor had gone. Several crew members reported hearing it whispered in dressing rooms months after the curtains fell. By the time the third official production was attempted in 1911, the insurance policy for the lead actor included a clause for paranormal circumstance. Seriously. The policy document read, "In case of unexplained death, suspected haunting, or spontaneous combustion, coverage shall be negotiated posthumously." Honestly, I'd have framed it. And yet, despite mounting tragedies, the town kept watching. Maybe out of morbid curiosity. Maybe because theater, even dangerous theater, is a kind of shared dream. Or maybe because part of them wanted to believe something ancient was at work, a script that wasn't written, but summoned, a stage that didn't host a story, but demanded one in which the lead always dies, not because of poor choices or plot, but because that's simply how the tale ends. Techfans. By the time the 20th century got into full swing with its telegraphs, motor cars, and overly confident mustaches, King of Ashes had developed a cult following. And not the fun, incense-scented kind. The audience members leave mid-show sobbing, and one guy always faints in the same seat kind. But here's the kicker: ticket sales surged. You know how people slow down to look at car accidents. Now imagine they pay full price, wear evening gowns, and clap afterward. The 1903 revival was supposed to be a one-night-only tribute to lost arts and forgotten scripts. But after the unexpected and, frankly, theatrically stunning death of lead actor Bartholomew Grimm, interest exploded. Grimm, a beloved local actor who had starred in everything from Othello to The Importance of Being Earnest, took the stage in full regalia, delivered a monologue so poignant that two elderly patrons began openly weeping, and then calmly sat on the throne center stage and stopped breathing. Just like that. One reviewer called it, "the most moving final performance I've ever seen." 1010. Would watch him die again. The town, disturbed, but oddly impressed, held a candlelight vigil. The very next month, the theater sold out 3 nights in a row. It became clear dying on stage wasn't just a coincidence anymore. It was part of the appeal. That's when the phrase 3 funerals and a standing ovation entered local slang. It referred to any situation that was objectively horrifying, but still ended with applause. In Merriwick, people joked about wanting to go out like Grimm. A local bakery even sold macabre confections called death rolls, buttery croissants shaped like miniature crowns, filled with cherry preserves, or, as the baker insisted, dramatized raspberry goo. Fun fact, there's historical precedent for audiences romanticizing tragedy. In the 19th century, Sarah Bernhardt, the French stage legend, was known for dying dramatically in nearly every role, often to rapturous applause. She even kept a coffin in her dressing room for rehearsal purposes. Some say King of Ashes just took the same theatrical devotion and turned the dial past 11. And maybe into hell. With each new production, the deaths gained spectacle. In 1924, a production in nearby Gables Hollow ended with the lead actor spontaneously bleeding from the eyes as he whispered the final line. Medical examiners found no trauma, no illness, and most chillingly, no blood in his body afterward. How do you even misplace several liters of blood? Doctors were baffled. The audience was enthralled. Someone in row C reportedly muttered, "This is better than the opera." By the 1930s, dying during King of Ashes had become a mark of theatrical greatness. Entire acting troupes auditioned with mock mortem scenes, hoping to earn the coveted role of King Aldrin. The Merriwick Playhouse installed a special red light backstage that flashed if a performer collapsed, prompting a medic or, more frequently, the understudy to dash forward. You know what's worse than being understudy in a cursed role? Being promoted? During this era, the play gained urban legend status beyond Merriwick. College campuses hosted unauthorized readings that inevitably ended with fainting spells, arguments, or spontaneous fire alarms. Theater majors wrote long essays debating whether the script itself was cursed, or if the play simply attracted the kind of people who liked to die loudly. That last theory became an actual thesis, titled The Aristotelian Death Drive in Recurring Performative Martyrdom. It received mixed reviews and a suspiciously scorched grade sheet. Meanwhile, some performers began using the legend for fame. One actor named Gene Holloway faked a mid-act seizure during his performance in 1941. The crowd gasped. Flowers were thrown. Gene took 5 curtain calls and basked in post-show drinks at the local speakeasy. 2 weeks later, he was found drowned in his own bathtub. The water was clear, the surface scattered with wet rose petals. Guess who didn't put flowers in his house? Weirdly enough, Gene's calendar had finished rehearsing soliloquy, written on the day he died. No one knew which soliloquy. His copy of the script had vanished. At some point, the legend outgrew the script itself. People started claiming that you didn't need to perform the play, just read the lines aloud in the theater to risk the curse. A high school tour guide once dared a group of students to recite Act 3. Scene 4 in the dark. 3 days later, the guide reported strange dreams and voices that sounded like applause inside my fridge. He transferred to coaching junior varsity soccer. Safer, a philosophical debate began in niche literary circles. Does the audience participate in the curse? If they cheer the death, do they share the guilt? There's an oddly fascinating psychological principle at play, here: shared suspension of disbelief. It's the idea that we, as viewers, willingly blur reality for the sake of immersion. But if a stage death is real, do we still suspend disbelief? Or are we complicit? Some philosophers argue that watching real tragedy masquerading as fiction creates moral dissonance. Others just call it Tuesday night at the Merriwick Playhouse. And still, no one stopped the show. The deaths became myth. Each new victim added another layer to the curse's theatrical lore. Ghost tour guides recited their names like verses. Candles were lit. Memorials were mounted on backstage walls. The velvet curtain was never replaced, even when someone spilled red wine on it in '47. Or was it wine? Nobody checked. And so, the legend solidified. A twisted Ouroboros of fame, death, and curtain calls. The Merriwick Playhouse had become a monument not just to theater, but to the finality of performance. Because in this show, there were no encores, only exits. By now, the cast knew better than to ask where the script came from. No one submitted King of Ashes to the director. No one dug it up from the archives. It just appeared. A pristine stack of pages on the prop table, handwritten, always in the same ink, dark, a little iridescent, like beetle shell ground into calligraphy. No cover page, no credits, no watermark. Just the title, King of Ashes, a tragedy in 5 acts. And always, always, the same oddity, Act 2. Scene 3 was slightly different each time. Sometimes the line was "Crown me gently," sometimes "Let the ash remember me," or "The fire knows who lied." The syntax danced, but the effect remained. People died. They didn't all die in performance. One actor tripped into an orchestra pit days before opening night. Another choked on a fig during vocal warm-ups. And one tragically overdosed on eye drops that weren't eye drops at all, but a weird fluid she swore came from the script spine. That actress, Lorraine Bixby, left a note on her mirror. The line changed again. Who's writing this? The script was like a recurring dream that didn't care about continuity. And much like recurring dreams, it often ended in terror. Now, here's the part where it gets academic, or, at least, creepily footnotable. There is a legitimate psychological phenomenon called cryptomnesia, where a person remembers something but mistakes it for an original idea. It's been cited in cases of unintentional plagiarism, prophetic writing, and even supposed ghostwriting. Literally, a fringe group of literary scholars once posited that King of Ashes was the result of collective cryptomnesia, passed through generations like an echo no one claimed to hear. But that doesn't explain the ink, or the paper that never yellows, or how every copy, when burned, releases a smell one witness described as charcoal and wet regret. It also doesn't explain why one actress, rehearsing alone, caught a glimpse of new stage directions mid-line, written in a language she didn't recognize. When she showed the director the page later, it had reverted. Just standard stage notes like exit left and kneels. But she insisted it had said something else. Something angular, alien. Characters that moved when you looked at them. She did not return for the second rehearsal. Now, let's talk about a particularly strange incident, the 1958 casting room anomaly. It was a modest open call. 25 hopefuls, 2 casting directors, 1 dying ficus in the corner, as is tradition. At 9:15 a.m., someone placed a script on the table. No one saw who. By 9:18, everyone in the room was reciting King of Ashes lines. Not together, not even the same scene, just spontaneously, as if their monologues were being siphoned from memory they didn't know they had. One woman performed the death scene perfectly, complete with gasp, collapse, and slow curl of the hand without ever having read it before. She didn't get the part. They never found her name on the sign-in sheet, or any trace that she ever existed. The ficus also died. Again. For good. In later years, people began treating the script like an artifact. It was passed around under the table at theater conventions, smuggled into fringe festivals, read under candlelight at drama camp like it was a cursed Goosebumps episode. Each new generation believed they were discovering it for the first time, and each generation added their own cautionary tale to the legend. Some swore reading the play out loud caused sleepwalking. Others said they dreamed in stage directions. One teenager in Wisconsin claimed he saw the king's crown floating in his bathroom mirror, muttering, "It's your line now." There's even a BuzzFeed Unsolved-style video on it, titled, "We tried to rehearse the cursed play, and I may be possessed now," which went viral for the moment. The boom mic caught an audible whisper, saying, "Not like that." Spoiler, there was no one else in the room, and no mic distortion. To this day, there's no verified origin of the King of Ashes manuscript. It's never been officially published. No theater has ever listed it with a royalty house. It doesn't exist in the Library of Congress. And yet, it has been performed partially or fully, at least 41 times, worldwide. Each time, someone involved died. Most theater professionals now refer to it with a quiet reverence, like Macbeth's more homicidal cousin. They never say the title in full. Some call it the Ash Play. Others refer to it simply as that script. One dramaturge famously refused to even handle it with bare hands, saying, "Words are just glyphs." But this one wants to be spoken. Here's a strange and specific fact in every known production. The lighting rig fails during Act 2. Doesn't matter the equipment, era, or voltage, modern tech, gaslight, candlelit flickers. Just during that scene, some say it's coincidence, others say it's performance. But one director's note from 1972 put it best. This play doesn't want to be staged. It wants to be remembered. And maybe that's the real horror. Not that a script kills, but that it rewrites itself in your memory. That it finds a voice through yours. That every time you speak the words aloud, you wonder, are these still my thoughts? Because there's a difference between acting a role and being written into one. Some productions of King of Ashes fall apart before the second rehearsal. Others never make it past the read-through, usually because someone ends up crying, bleeding, or missing. But the ones that do survive long enough to mount a stage, those are the ones that birth legends. Take, for instance, the 1985 production in Albany. A minimalist reimagining in a black box theater, advertised as a postmodern confrontation with mortality. Translation: nobody could afford props. And the smoke machine was just a guy with a vape and asthma. That show never opened. During final dress, 3 cast members reported hearing whispers from the catwalk, though no one was up there. One actress claimed her costume kept changing color when she wasn't looking. The director said it was a trick of the light. That director later moved to Panama and refused to answer questions, only replying to emails with, "The fire knows." And then there were the rehearsals from hell, as actors began calling them. It always starts small. A missed line, a script that's suddenly rearranged, with whole paragraphs vanishing and reappearing, sound cues playing unprompted. Then things escalate, like props that go missing, only to be found burning in the orchestra pit, or lighting boards that won't respond until the actor hits a specific line, "Let it burn," and "Bury me." That's when the house lights flicker, the rig creaks, and every smoke detector starts screaming in Morse code. A peculiar trait of these rehearsals is how the actors begin to behave. They don't sleep well. They report dreams of mirrors and ash. One cast member in 1992 was hospitalized after trying to rewrite the ending onto her own skin with a mechanical pencil. Others speak in phrases from the script at odd times, even outside the theater. Would you like fries with your regret is less charming when your barista whispers it while staring at an empty cup. During one rehearsal in 2007, the director found the stage manager kneeling center stage, staring at a dead pigeon that had fallen from the rafters. When asked what happened, the manager said, "The bird knows too much." And then there's the shifting stage directions. Actors swear that blocking changes without them noticing, that the marks on the floor, the pieces of tape meant to indicate where they should stand, move, not by much, a few inches, just enough to be wrong. One performer stepped on a taped X and promptly fell through an open trap door that had no business being open. The tape was later found reattached to a mirror backstage, upside down. Historically, these anomalies have been explained as group suggestibility, a real psychological phenomenon where individuals conform to shared delusions or perceptions in high-pressure environments. It's common in close-knit performance groups. It's also been cited in hauntings, cults, and one very unfortunate synchronized swimming team in Belarus. But group hysteria doesn't explain Roe. It never does. Ours Row H, seat 9, always empty. Not because it's reserved, not because anyone forgets to sell the ticket. It's because it doesn't exist. There are only 8 seats in Row H, and yet someone is always sitting in the 9th. She's pale, red-lipped, wearing a black veil and holding a program that no usher remembers handing out. No one sees her arrive. No one sees her leave. Actors who spot her during performance always lose their place. One once fell to his knees and wept mid-soliloquy, shouting, "You weren't supposed to be here yet," before collapsing. Audience members typically think it's avant-garde. At first, the cast tried to dismiss it. Maybe it was a donor who liked to sneak in. Maybe it was theater magic, a little mystery that made it all feel more real. Until someone pulled the security footage. There she was, sitting motionless for 87 minutes. Then, frame by frame, vanishing like a bad pixel during the curtain call. No exit. No movement. Just gone. Some call her the widow. Others think she's the play's author. A 2020 Reddit thread speculated that she's the personification of the script itself, a living audience. Always watching. Never applauding. A graduate student tried to track her across productions. His findings were inconclusive, mostly due to the fact that halfway through writing his thesis, he was hospitalized for exhaustion. His final notes were a mess of arrows, circles, and the phrase, "she's the Q." That same student later went viral on TikTok for burning a copy of King of Ashes while playing Bohemian Rhapsody backward. The video ends abruptly with a loud bang and someone shouting, "The chandelier," whether it was a prank or not. The chandelier in question reportedly crashed to the floor the next day in a completely different theater. The debate about the widow remains unresolved. Is she a ghost? A shared hallucination? A metaphor for performance anxiety in corsets? One British journalist, investigating the phenomenon, described her as the stage's memory in mourning clothes. He later recanted, citing too many dreams involving velvet and teeth. But perhaps the most unsettling thing about the widow in Row H is that, once you notice her, you keep noticing her. In theaters, in crowds, in reflections, a whisper of red lipstick behind glass, a figure standing just one seat too far from the aisle, a program in her hand that reads, "Act 5 is for you." And somehow, everyone agrees she's never clapping, just watching, always watching. The only thing theater people fear more than budget cuts is Shakespeare's ghost showing up uninvited. So, naturally, when an ambitious French actor/spiritual dramaturge named Etienne Laurent declared in 1923 that he would break the curse of King of Ashes using a séance, nobody was particularly surprised. Concerned, yes, but not surprised. Etienne had already made a name for himself in Paris with avant-garde interpretations of the bard, including his infamous Hamlet, but Everyone is a Duck performance that got him chased out of the Comédie Française with stale baguettes. After fleeing to England under mysterious circumstances involving a poisoned spotlight long story, he ended up in Marowak for creative rebirth. Naturally, he set his sights on the play. He announced a revival of King of Ashes, starring himself, directed by himself, with set design by someone named Moonblood, who may or may not have been his cousin. But this wasn't just a performance. Etienne promised a ritual cleansing, a theatrical exorcism, he said, dramatically swirling a scarf. Now, to be clear, seances weren't exactly rare back then. The 1920s were a golden age for the supernatural curious. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle himself spent years promoting spiritualism, despite also inventing the world's most logical detective. Go figure. But Etienne's séance wasn't your garden variety table knock. He held it on stage, with the full cast, in costume, under moonlight filtered through a stained glass prop window he insisted was aligned with cosmic frequencies. Which, sure. Who needs an electrician when you've got the planets? There were candles. There was Latin. There was a taxidermied fox in ceremonial robes, placed stage left for energy balancing. And at exactly 11:13 p.m., Etienne gasped, went stiff, and proclaimed, "I see a throne made of ribs. I see the king, and he sees me. The fire will kiss me at the curtain." Then he passed out cold. The cast, appropriately freaked, carried him to the green room. When he woke up 10 minutes later, Etienne didn't remember anything past lighting the candles. But from that moment on, things got theatrical, in all the wrong ways. The lighting rig, which had functioned fine during weeks of rehearsal, began shorting out whenever Etienne stepped on stage. Props fell on cue, but never at the right cue. Mirrors cracked backstage in patterns no one could explain. One formed the unmistakable shape of a crown. The script started changing again, this time inserting unfamiliar lines into Etienne's scenes. He claimed he never wrote them. No one else recognized them. And when the director tried to remove them, the ink bled off the page. Meanwhile, the widow in row H returned. Every night, same veil, same seat. Except this time, she was smiling, and that terrified everyone. As opening night approached, Etienne insisted the show must go on. He was more inspired than ever. The spirits demand a finale, he declared, flinging rose petals into the air like a haunted florist. The audience came expecting either brilliance or a breakdown. Possibly both, and they got it. Etienne's performance was electric, riveting, almost too perfect. When he reached the infamous monologue, "Let the fire know my name," the house lights dimmed without cue. A hush fell over the crowd. Then came the crown scene. Etienne raised the ancient-looking prop, an actual bronze crown someone found buried in the trap room, and placed it on his head. He smiled. And then, calmly, as if finishing a well-rehearsed line, he said, "The curtain is warm." The velvet dropped, and when it rose again, Etienne was gone. Not collapsed, not backstage, gone. The stage was empty. His costume lay neatly folded on the throne. The crown rested atop the pile, steaming faintly. The audience applauded. Of course, they assumed it was all part of the act, until the police showed up 2 hours later, responding to a call from the stage manager who found no sign of Etienne anywhere in the building. The exit doors had been locked from the inside. There were no footprints in the dust of the wings, and the security feed, static, from the exact moment he placed the crown on his head. Investigators theorized everything from clever stage tricks to a mental breakdown and impromptu escape. But those who knew Etienne swore he wasn't the kind to disappear without an encore. In the days that followed, several cast members began receiving letters. Not emails, not texts, letters, all handwritten, no return address. Each said the same thing. He is with the script now. He took his final bow. Creepy, yes. And it got weirder. One actor found his lines rewritten again, this time in Etienne's handwriting. A costume seamstress reported the distinct scent of Etienne's signature cologne vetiver and regret lingering in the costume loft. The widow still showing up, now with a second program in her lap. Her seat, too, began flickering visible one night, gone the next. The usher claimed he saw it shift 2 feet closer to the stage, all of which led scholars and playwrights to revisit the séance. What if it worked? What if the play isn't haunted, but alive? An evolving entity that collects its players, that absorbs its stars into the myth, that rewards those who truly commit with something more than applause. Maybe that's why the script always reappears reborn, rewritten, recast. It's not just a play, it's a performance that feeds. And Etienne, he gave it exactly what it wanted, a perfect death. Most theaters close for renovations. The Merowick Playhouse closed for an exorcism. It wasn't officially called that there were no holy water press releases or demonic eviction notices filed at Town Hall, but the 1963 closure was suspiciously quiet for a place that once mailed out flyers titled, "Now with Less Curse." Following Etienne's disappearing act, community trust in the theater began to erode. Locals still came for ghost tours and urban legend TikToks. But the idea of mounting a full production of King of Ashes, not even the most desperate dinner theater actor would take that risk. Until Isabella Crown. Yes, Crown, her real name. And yes, she made the joke constantly. If I die on stage, it'll be poetic. Spoiler, it wasn't poetry. It was something stranger. Isabella was a former New York City ingenue who fled Broadway after a famously bad on-stage breakup involving a glass slipper and a live mic. She arrived in Merowick in 1962, claiming she wanted authenticity, dirt, and maybe ghosts, but only tasteful ones. Within a year, she revived the Merowick Playhouse. Not just cosmetically, she scrubbed every inch of the place, replaced the velvet seat cushions, and even tried to remove the bloodstain on the third-floor stairwell. It wouldn't come out. They just painted over it with Victorian garnet. Isabella's goal, a single-act showcase of King of Ashes. No full play. No 5-act descent into madness, just a dramatic reading of Act 1 by candlelight. Minimal lighting. No props. No crown. What could go wrong? The community was hesitant, but intrigued. It helped that Isabella was charming, persuasive, and wore a lot of very large hats. The local arts council approved a one-night event. They billed it as intermission for the damned and exploration of theatrical folklore. The theater sold out. The night began smoothly. Guests were greeted with cider and cryptic warnings. A string quartet played unsettling renditions of nursery rhymes. No one found the widow in row H, though ushers noted a faint perfume of rosewater and something burning. Isabella stepped on stage wearing a simple black dress, no veil, no theatrics, just the script, bound in a red ribbon and opened carefully, like a gift you don't fully trust. She read with poise, grace, a few chuckles from the audience. Nothing scary. Not yet. Then came the final line of the scene. Let them bow, for soon I'll kneel. Silence. And then, the lights went out. A collective gasp. The room plunged into pitch. Someone laughed nervously. Then there was the unmistakable sound of movement, not footsteps, not creaking, but the sliding of something across the stage. A dragging, a whisper. When the lights returned 30 seconds later, Isabella was gone. Her script lay neatly closed on the floor. The microphone buzzed for just a second, emitting a soft, slow exhale like someone blowing out candles. Then, nothing. Absolute, theatrical silence. Panic set in quickly. Ushers fumbled for flashlights. Stagehands shouted her name. The audience murmured, not sure if it was immersive theater or an actual emergency. Spoiler, it was both. Backstage. Isabella's dressing room was untouched. Her coat still hung on the rack, her lipstick uncapped. A mug of herbal tea sat steaming on the counter, as if she'd just left it seconds ago. But the footage showed no exit. No one passed the back hall. Every camera froze during the blackout, and resumed only after the house lights came back. She simply vanished. A formal investigation was opened. Theories ranged from staged disappearance to mental breakdown to sudden kidnapping. Some suggested she orchestrated the entire thing as performance art, citing her tendency to quote Marina Abramovich and wear gloves indoors. And then, a week later, the letters began arriving, each typed on aged paper. No stamps, no return address. It wasn't an exit, it was an entrance. That's all they said. Multiple crew members received them. So did the mayor. One even ended up inside a library copy of the complete works of Sophocles. As a bookmark, no one admitted placing. A journalist for the Merowick Echo wrote a scathing piece titled Theatrics or Threat, in which he accused Isabella of being a publicity parasite feeding on local tragedy. The paper folded 3 weeks later when the printing press caught fire in a building with no electrical issues and no record of flammable materials. The fire inspector allegedly muttered, "It smells like curtains," then retired. Meanwhile, locals began reporting flickering lights in their homes, specifically when reciting certain lines from the play aloud. A theater-loving retiree recounted hearing applause in her basement after humming the overture. And of course, Row H, Seat 9, returned. This time, not empty. Audience members swore they saw Isabella, pale, composed, veil lifted, smiling, even waving once. But when ushers approached, the seat was always empty and cold, like someone had just left it, or never did. One staff member refused to return to work, claiming she saw 2 programs on the Seat 1 for King of Ashes, and one with no title. Just a single line. Intermission never ends. The town council quietly shuttered the playhouse again, this time not for repairs or rebirth, but for containment. Boards were nailed over the doors, salt poured over the thresholds. A priest was called, then politely asked to leave when he began humming a tune from the second act. To this day, no one knows what happened to Isabella Crown. Her personal belongings were never collected. Her apartment remained untouched, rent unpaid, but no one dared evict her ghost. And somewhere in the archives of the Merowick Playhouse sits a single marked-up script, one sticky note affixed to the front. Let's try that again, but slower this time. The Merowick Playhouse remained silent for nearly a decade after Isabella Crown's vanishing act silent in the public sense. At least, inside, things still moved. Caretakers tasked with weekly maintenance refused to step past the vestibule. They claimed the floorboards hummed softly, like a string section tuning endlessly in a key no orchestra dared play. One junior custodian lasted exactly 3 minutes inside before sprinting out, swearing that all the clocks had started ticking in unison, even the ones without hands. By the late 1970s, most townsfolk referred to the theater in the past tense. Until she returned, Vanessa Hale, a flame-haired actress with cheekbones sharp enough to slice intermission cheese trays, came to Merowick from Los Angeles with a dream, a duffel bag, and exactly 1 suitcase full of books titled things like The Shadow Self on Stage and Your Aura Deserves a Spotlight. She'd made headlines a few years prior by doing a one-woman King Lear in which all the daughters were sock puppets. It was weird. Critics were confused. Ticket sales spiked anyway. She was, in short, perfect for the Playhouse. In 1981, Vanessa proposed a limited-run production of King of Ashes with one rule: no full performances. Only excerpts, readings, controlled monologues. She called it a theatrical autopsy. The town, reluctantly curious, agreed. The idea of dissecting the curse academically seemed safer, like studying a lion through glass. Rehearsals began quietly. Vanessa selected a minimalist cast, black outfits, no props, just words and breath and posture. But on the 5th day, she vanished. Not dramatically, not on stage, just poof. She finished her scene, set the script down, walked off the edge of the spotlight and was gone before she hit the wings. One moment there, the next, not. The cast searched. The police were called. A dog was brought in to sniff her trail, but the dog refused to enter the building, curling into a tight ball and whimpering at the base of the stairs. No footprints, no surveillance. Just a note scribbled in the margins of her copy. Act 2 doesn't start where we think it does. And that was that. The theater closed. Again. No more experiments, no more readings. Just silence. Until 1993. That was the year a new generation decided to poke the bear. Or in this case, poke the trapdoor. A local troupe of high school actors emboldened by 90s grunge. A VHS copy of The Craft, and far too much instant coffee broke into the Playhouse one October night. Their plan to live-stream a full walkthrough of the building, culminating in a dramatic reading of the infamous death scene. It was meant to be ironic. It wasn't. Halfway through their tour, the camera caught something no one could explain. A figure in row H, seat 9, smiling, nodding, mouthing words just a split second ahead of the reader. When the actor reading the monologue reached Ash Remembers All Who Kneel, the lights blew out. The feed ended. Only 3 of the 14s were found. The 4th never seen again. The tape, yes. Actual tape was eventually recovered. The last frame showed an empty stage, then static. Then, for exactly 1 second, Vanessa Hale, blink, and gone. After that, the Merriwick Playhouse was padlocked permanently, or so people thought. Because in 2003, a real estate developer bought the building. Planning to convert it into luxury haunted condos, he brought in contractors, designers, even a feng shui consultant, one that used incense, quartz, and an unreasonable number of wind chimes. They worked for 3 days before the first crew member quit after discovering all his tools stacked neatly in a pyramid shape beneath the trapdoor. On the 5th day, the blueprints changed. Yes, changed. One morning, the master copy had a new room drawn into the basement, a sub-level that none of the workers remembered building or seeing. It wasn't even technically possible, according to the theater's foundation specs. But when they broke through the floor, the room was there, a sealed stone chamber, no doors, no markings except for a single chair and a strange circle etched into the stone. The circle resembled a stage direction "Enter Crowned." The site was closed immediately. The developer moved to the Maldives and now runs a seashell Etsy store. The chamber was resealed, but everyone involved refused to speak about it. Some claimed the acoustics were unnatural, like whispering into a canyon that whispered back. Others said the walls were warm to the touch, but only when you weren't looking directly at them. And in the middle of it all was the trapdoor, old, iron-framed, hinges rusted but sturdy, etched with a name no one recognized, except one stagehand. He said, "That's Vanessa's middle name." He wasn't wrong. Now, for years afterward, King of Ashes disappeared again. The Playhouse gathered dust, cobwebs, legends. But then a new horror took root: reenactments. Some genius in town, probably fueled by pumpkin spice and bad decisions, decided to turn tragedy into tourism. The Merriwick Historical Society launched Ashfest in 2010, a week-long Halloween event featuring mock deaths, cursed monologues karaoke, and DIY prop crown stations. It was meant to be fun, until the first reenactor vanished. Right in front of children, he was reenacting the Etienne crown scene, complete with dry ice and an embarrassingly heavy wig. As he hit the line, "The curtain is warm," the smoke surged, and he didn't come out the other side. The children clapped. He never came back. Officials called it a staging malfunction. The actor's personal effects were found later stacked neatly in the dressing room, his wallet, phone, and keys atop a script that no one admitted printing. The festival was canceled. The theater was renamed Off Limits. But somehow, the script keeps coming back. Someone will always find it in a desk, in an attic, on a bench at the bus stop. And every time, Act 2 is just a little different. There's a phrase people toss around in Merriwick when things go sideways: "The curtain's peeking again." It means someone's messing with the Playhouse, And in 2014, the curtain peaked hard, with most of the tragic lore now half joked about in late-night bar conversations and dramatized for campfire teenagers. It was easy to forget the body count. That is, until a young city council eager to revitalize local culture made a bold, if historically unwise, decision. They reopened the Merriwick Playhouse. Not fully, just enough for guided tours and local museum partnerships. Carefully curated, controlled, safe. They replaced the locks, installed emergency lighting, and slapped heritage site placards on the walls like spiritual armor. Ghost tour operators rejoiced, historians groaned, and teenagers lined up in Halloween costumes to see the Death Theater. Soon, a brand new exhibit opened on the second floor, Legends of the Stage Truth, Tragedy and Theatrics. It featured costumes, props, and recreations of various scenes from King of Ashes. A wax figure of Etienne Laurent was positioned mid-bow, nearby. A prop throne from the 1947 production sat roped off with a small place. Please do not sit on the throne. It is just not a good idea. Tourism boomed, locals adjusted, and within months, the entire curse seemed like a charming town quirk, until the reenactors went off script. A group of high school drama kids, because of course it was, were given special permission to stage a short, 3-scene interpretation of King of Ashes as part of a town-funded theater program. It was supposed to be safe, supervised, sanitized. They rehearsed under fluorescent lights, with rewritten dialogue, no candles, no costumes from the archives, just simple black shirts and lots of enthusiasm. But something strange happened in the third rehearsal. Cameras lost focus whenever the lead actor, Jordan Price, recited lines. Scripts began to subtly mismatch. One assistant director swore she saw an entire page appear, that no one remembered writing scene directions that read, "The king must burn, to rise." Then came the whispers. Jordan began reporting voices during practice. He claimed they were helpful, encouraging, that they told him how to deliver the monologue with appropriate depth. The director brushed it off. Kids get weird when they're invested. Then, during a routine fire drill, the smoke alarm in the theater tripped on its own. Not once, not twice. 7 times. No smoke, no cause. Just a loud, shrieking alarm that began precisely at 2:13 p.m. every day, right when Jordan's character in Act 2 would deliver his line. The ash is a promise, not an end. Coincidence? You wish. Then Jordan started changing. He became quieter, more precise. His performance, once clunky, turned polished, haunting. Too good for a 17-year-old. His fellow cast members said he started referring to backstage as the Wings of Judgment and wrote marginalia in the script like, "Let the crown choose." On opening night, he showed up early, hours before anyone else. The janitor found him sitting cross-legged on the stage, eyes closed, script open before him, though the pages were blank. Jordan was murmuring a line no one recognized. "When they forget me, I return brighter." The performance began without a hitch, until it hit Act 2. As Jordan stood in the circle of warm light, he raised a prop crown newly designed by a local artist to resemble vines and thorns, and paused. The house lights flickered. The air turned still, and then Jordan dropped to his knees and whispered, "I know the line now." The spotlight burst, screams, darkness. When the lights came back, Jordan was standing stiff, staring, not quite there. He completed the scene. The audience applauded, nervously at first. Then, with rising enthusiasm, he took a bow. 3 days later, he disappeared. His car was found abandoned in the school parking lot, phone off, bag untouched. The only clue, a program from the performance tucked under the windshield wiper, with the phrase "The King Returns" scrawled in red ink across the front. The local police launched a full investigation. His family cooperated, but there were no leads, no signs of struggle, no sightings. Until 2 weeks later, when a museum staffer cleaning the throne exhibit found a handwritten note taped under the seat. "He's learning. Be patient." That was when the town officially started pretending nothing had happened. The police closed the case. The playhouse was quietly reclosed. Again, but this time with an extra layer of denial. Because something had shifted, people started noticing patterns. Electrical surges every time anyone spoke the monologue aloud. Cracks in the mirrors of the second-floor costume room always forming in a crown-like shape. Even the seat numbers in row H began misaligning. Seat 9 now appeared on some ticketing maps, then vanished, then returned. No one could explain it, but everyone felt it. That deep, familiar hum beneath the floorboards, the faint warmth behind the curtain, the rustling of a script being rewritten again. What had begun as tragedy had become something worse, tourism, because nothing feeds a curse like attention. And now, the whole town was part of the cast. You know what every curse loves a skeptic? They walk in smug, armed with reason and flashlights, waving around their degrees like holy water. They speak in syllogisms. They wear sensible shoes. And they always say the same thing right before things go sideways. I don't believe in any of this nonsense. Enter Colin Price, a semi-retired soap opera actor with a jawline like a deflated basketball and the confidence of someone who'd played a doctor on TV for 6 seasons and thought it made him an actual medical authority. In 1997, Colin arrived in Merriwick on the back of a poorly aged shampoo commercial and a press release that read, "The curse ends here, a star reclaims the stage." Yes, he went there, the local arts council, exhausted by decades of cryptic disappearances and rising mold problems. Figured, sure, why not let a D-list celebrity tempt fate? Maybe it'll reset the curse, or at least give us a fundraising gala. Colin agreed to star in a full revival of King of Ashes, insisting he would finally bury the superstition under layers of hard lighting and tighter blocking. The press loved it. The tabloids had a field day. Cursed play to be defeated by man who once sold foot cream. Colin didn't care. He loved the attention. He signed autographs, took interviews, bragged that he'd read the entire script out loud while eating cold pasta, and nothing happened but indigestion. He wore a t-shirt that said, "Death by Act 2, I doubt it." And that's the thing about doubting the unknown, it often decides to introduce itself. Rehearsals began promptly. Colin showed up early, brought coffee, flirted with stagehands, did push-ups in the dressing room mirror while humming show tunes. Everything was fine until they got to that scene. You know the one? Act 2, Scene 3. The monologue. The first time he read it, the lights dimmed slightly. Just for a second. Stage manager blamed faulty wiring. The second time, the mic cut out. Then the air went cold. Colin laughed it off. But his notes began to change. He started writing weird things in the margins. Things like "This line has teeth, and the king remembers all who mock him." He didn't remember writing those. One day, the director found Colin staring into the wings. "Just listening," Colin whispered. "For what?" "For the page turn." Over the next few weeks, Colin changed. He got quieter, more focused. Started wearing his costume everywhere, even to coffee runs. Said it helped him stay in the role. He also began calling the other cast members by their character names, even off stage, even in public. "Isn't he method?" one actor asked. "No," the director replied. "He's terrified." The final rehearsal was the turning point. Colin arrived late, pale, unshaven. He mumbled something about mirrors and dreams and a voice under the floorboards. When asked if he was okay, he smiled and said, "It's fine. I just finally understand the king." That night, the trap door opened again, unprompted, loud, heavy. The sound echoed through the rafters like a closing book. Colin froze mid-scene. His face went slack. His voice dropped half an octave. He said a line that wasn't in the script. "I wear the silence now." Then he fainted. Medics arrived. Colin came to almost immediately, disoriented but lucid. He waved it off, insisted on continuing the show. But from that day forward, something was wrong. Crew members reported seeing Colin talking to someone backstage, someone no one else saw. He claimed her name was Violet, described her as pale, veiled, with red lips and a voice like velvet stretched too thin. He said she knew the original ending, and here's where things get serious. 2 nights before opening, the assistant lighting designer found Colin in the basement, standing over the trap door, murmuring lines in a language no one could identify. When asked what he was doing, Colin turned slowly and said, "The king rehearses when the house is empty." The designer quit that night. Opening night arrived. The playhouse was packed. Press, locals, paranormal podcasters. One guy with a homemade EMF meter duct-taped to a selfie stick. Colin stepped on stage. He was brilliant. The first act flowed. His delivery was crisp, nuanced, magnetic. Audiences whispered about awards. Applause boomed. The curse, it seemed, had finally been broken. Then came Act 2. Colin entered, walked to center stage, and stood still. Too still. For a long time, the house lights dimmed, not part of the cue. He looked out over the crowd, smiled, and said, not his scripted line, but, "Now I burn with purpose." Then calmly, he reached beneath the throne and pulled out a mirror. No one knew it was there. It wasn't part of the set. He held it up, whispered something no mic picked up. The glass shattered. The lights went out. Panic, screams. A fire alarm that triggered, even though there was no fire. When emergency lights flickered on, Colin was gone. No trapdoor open, no smoke. Just his costume, folded neatly on the stage, and a single line carved into the wood beneath the spotlight. Mock not the monologue. He hasn't been seen since. His dressing room remained sealed for years. When it was finally opened, they found dozens of pages, handwritten notes, scribbles, line breakdowns, and a single quote circled in red. To doubt the play is to play the doubt. To this day, the theater keeps a seat empty in his honor, not out of respect, but because sometimes, late at night, someone's already sitting there. Construction crews, by nature, are not prone to superstition. They're pragmatic, logical, more worried about cost overrun and union breaks than ancient theatrical curses. So when a restoration project in 2018 sent a team to modernize the Merriwick Playhouse, no one thought to warn them. Or maybe someone did. But by then, the script had already made its way into the building again. The goal was simple: reinforce the foundation, update the wiring, and finally seal that pesky trapdoor in the stage that had, over the years, been blamed for everything from vanishing actors to temperature drops, to one particularly nasty incident involving an actor and a fog machine. The team arrived with drills, sledgehammers, and the unshakable bravado of people who've never seen a ghost but know how to handle asbestos. They started with the stage floor. The plan was to lift the warped boards, install reinforced support beams, and restain the original oak something historically accurate, but also resistant to spectral moisture. Day 1 went smoothly. Day 2, the trapdoor reopened itself. That's not poetic language. It literally reopened. The iron bolt, sealed shut for decades, snapped cleanly in half without tools. 1 minute it was closed. The next a gaping square in the center of the stage. The shadows below as black as unrecorded history. The workers, predictably, laughed it off. Faulty weld, one said. Pressure from underneath. Another muttered. Wood rot. Then they looked beneath. It wasn't wood rot. It was a chamber, one no one had ever documented. Even older than the trapdoor itself. Lined with stone, not brick, not cement, something ancient. Blackened like obsidian, but grainy like bone. The space was roughly 15 by 15 feet, perfectly square. The air inside was still, warm, and smelled faintly of myrrh and iron filings. In the center, a small dais. On top of the dais, a mummified hand clutching what looked like a quill. And not just any quill. This one shimmered. Every time someone looked away and looked back, it was pointing in a different direction. Nobody wanted to touch it. Smart. They called the city. Then a historian. Then, reluctantly, a spiritualist from Asheville who wore 6 rings and said things like, "This place is humming in D minor." He refused to enter the chamber, stood at the edge of the trapdoor and muttered, "Someone wrote something in blood here," and it remembered how. City officials cordoned off the area, cited safety regulations, and said nothing to the public. The find was quietly documented, filed under archaeological curiosities, and never spoken of again. But strange things started happening at night. Cameras would catch movement on stage, shadows in the shape of actors rehearsing, miming silent scenes in the dark. Theaters don't breathe, technically. But staff began reporting the scent of ink and burnt paper, accompanied by the soft, rhythmic sound of pages turning, even when the entire building was empty. One janitor quit after walking into the chamber and swearing he saw a throne where the dais had been. He described a figure seated there, crowned, waiting. He also said the figure mouthed something. "Write it again." Now, here's where the academic world re-enters with all the dignity of a drunk uncle at a séance. In 2020, a team of graduate researchers received leaked blueprints of the Merowick Chamber. They became obsessed with the geometry of the space. One paper argued it was built as a vocal chamber designed to amplify human speech directly upward, as if feeding words into the stage. Others saw parallels with the Hypogeum of Hal Saflieni, a Neolithic subterranean temple in Malta famous for its acoustics. The theory: the chamber wasn't a basement. It was a voice box, part of the theater, built to speak or to be spoken into. This reignited the philosophical debate that had haunted theater forums for decades. What if the play isn't cursed, but conscious? Not metaphorically, literally. A living script. A self-aware narrative that rewrites itself with every actor, every audience member, feeding off the energy of attention, performance, belief. You don't cast the play casts you. The hand holding the quill a relic, a recording device, a contract. And once your voice passes through that stage, it writes you down. One historian, anonymously quoted, called the Merowick stage a closed circuit of intent and memory. Another said, "It's not theater, it's an altar with stage directions." And maybe that's why it never ends, because scripts aren't finished. They're just paused, and King of Ashes. It's been writing this whole time, just under the floorboards. A week after the chamber was resealed, one of the workers returned, broke into the theater alone. He set up a live stream. He brought a single page with him, a copy of Act 2, Scene 3. He read the monologue aloud. Calm. Clear. A surprisingly good performance, actually. But as he finished the final line, "Let the fire write me in," the camera glitched, flickered, went black. The stream never returned. All they found later was the quill, in the middle of the stage, still warm. The phrase method acting usually means locking yourself in a room, refusing to break character, and annoying your co-stars until someone accidentally throws a chair. It does not usually mean summoning ancient entities via monologue. But for director Leon Volker, realism meant everything. And in the winter of 2022, he took authenticity so far off the rails it circled back around and bit him on the metaphysical rear. Leon was a rising name in experimental theater, loved by critics, loathed by actors, and perpetually followed by the scent of cedarwood oil and espresso anxiety. His claim to fame: a fully immersive adaptation of The Tempest, staged entirely inside a drained municipal swimming pool. So naturally, when Leon set his sights on reviving King of Ashes at the long-abandoned Merowick Playhouse, no one batted an eye. Except, maybe, the ones peering through mirrors. Leon claimed his version would liberate the curse through confrontation. He planned to perform the original script in full, untouched, using as many authentic materials as possible: costumes, props, lighting rigs, all sourced from the theater's extensive and questionably catalogued archives. His vision: a full resurrection of intent. He even found the original score, buried in the archives beneath a taxidermied raven and a moldy tambourine. He transcribed it by hand and hired a chamber orchestra to perform live. Unfortunately, Every rehearsal ended with at least one violinist vomiting or fainting. Still, Leon pressed on. And then he found the ritual page. It wasn't part of any known copy. It sat loose in a folder labeled MISC. Props burn if you must. The page was handwritten in red ink, entirely in stage directions. It read like a spell. Crown upon flame. Speak thrice. Let the throne answer. Curtain must fall before breath resumes. Leon was delighted. Finally, a real climax. He rewrote the ending of the play to incorporate the ritual. No one else on the cast knew exactly what it meant, but Leon insisted it was part of the theatrical tradition. He began referring to the cast as vessels and the playhouse as a willing gate. You know, normal stuff. The actors tired, underpaid, and mildly possessed went along with it. Opening night was a sellout. Buzz had grown online, with theater nerds and paranormal TikTokers trading theories like baseball cards. Everyone wanted to see if the curse would break, or break someone else. The lights dimmed. The overture began played on period-accurate instruments that sounded like something crying through wood. Leon watched from the balcony, smiling, taking notes, dressed in all black, as directors must. The first act, smooth, intense, eerie but controlled. Act 2, different story. As the lead actor approached the fabled monologue, the air in the theater turned heavy, like breathing through fogged glass. Audience members leaned forward. A woman in row H seat 8.5 some said adjusted her veil. The actor spoke the line, "Let the fire write me in." Cue ritual. Leon stood, raised the restored crown, a twisted circlet of iron and bone, allegedly found in the chamber beneath the stage, and held it over a candle set into the orchestra pit. He said the line, "Crown upon flame." Then, without cue, the entire theater fell silent. No lights, no sound, just the glow of that single defiant candle. Then the actor on stage, Tommy Reyes, 28, classically trained. Very nice hair, began to levitate, only a few inches, but enough to make the audience gasp. He didn't seem aware. His eyes were blank. His mouth moved slowly. "Speak thrice." He whispered the line again, and once more. Then the candle went out, and Tommy fell crashing into the throne with such force it splintered into ash. No pyrotechnics, no trapdoor, just dust. The light snapped back. Screams erupted. The curtain closed itself. And Leon, gone. Not in the wings, not in the balcony, not in the bathroom or the booth or hiding behind a boom mic. Just not there. They found his notes later in the director's chair. Scrawled at the bottom of the last page, "The throne answered. Tommy Reyes survived." Kind of. He awoke 17 hours later in the orchestra pit, wrapped in the velvet curtain like a burrito. His only words, line. He never acted again. He now runs a crystal shop in Sedona. Following the disaster, which the town press lovingly dubbed Crown Gate, authorities stepped in. Again. The theater was declared structurally unsound. Again. And for the third time in under a century, the Marowak Playhouse was condemned. Only this time, it stayed condemned. Sort of. Because here's the thing about a good ritual, it echoes. Over the following months, reports of strange occurrences began to spread. A regional theater in Pittsburgh claimed their lights flickered every time someone recited a monologue. One high school actor in Toronto blacked out during rehearsal and woke up clutching a script he swore he didn't own. And a community theater in Ohio canceled their entire season after a fog machine refused to stop spewing smoke shaped vaguely like a crown. Online forums buzzed. Was King of Ashes spreading? Had Leon awakened something that couldn't be returned? One Reddit user posted, "I said the line out loud in my bathroom mirror as a joke. Now it's etched into the steam. It won't wipe off." Another responded, "Yeah, bro, I said it too. My Alexa ordered a crown. Funny, until it isn't. Because now, people were beginning to question whether the script was ever bound to the theater. Maybe it had just been incubating there. And now, it was touring. Some plays go on tour. This one went on pilgrimage. After the disaster at the Merriwick Playhouse and the very polite government-mandated closure involving 3 padlocks, 2 "Do not enter" signs, and 1 local pastor who blessed the building while holding a microwave Bible, most assumed King of Ashes was done, retired, requiemed, folded into the fog of stage legend. But stories like these, they don't die. They get Wi-Fi. In the spring of 2023, a TikTok account named Hashasofking appeared posting cryptic 20-second clips. A candle in an empty theater. A woman in a veil flipping pages silently. A crown, slowly rotating on a turntable, captioned, "The fire knows you." No context, no credits, no explanation. Within a week, the account hit 1.2 million followers. By week 3, people were staging their own versions of the play in basements, garages, abandoned malls, anywhere with a semblance of echo and an appetite for consequence. It became a challenge. A Bayerwerst's King of Ashes challenge trended for 72 hours straight, right between Cars AI Grandma Filter and Zakrakors underwater. Yoga fails. YouTubers dove into the lore. Podcasters did cursed line reaction episodes. One Twitch streamer attempted a full read-through live. They made it to Act 2, Scene 3 before the camera cut out. The lights in their room burst, and the only thing left on screen was their chair, spinning slowly. It's archived. You can still find it. But maybe don't. Meanwhile, in a sleepy town outside Atlanta, a small black box theater called the Holloway Fringe announced an exclusive invite-only performance of King of Ashes. Real cast, real set, real script. They called it opening night. One last time. No one knew who was organizing it. The theater's usual programming was improv comedy and the occasional staged reading of A Streetcar, named Desire with sock puppets. But overnight, the place was sold out. The seats were booked via a mysterious website that vanished 3 days after launch. Audience members were vetted, required to sign a waiver. No phones, no cameras. The lead role went to Micah Rain, a TikTok star best known for his 3-minute Shakespeare monologues performed in abandoned stairwells. He had 3.4 million followers and a jawline that could cut wire. In his acceptance video, Micah smirked into the lens and said, "Guess I'm finally getting that standing ovation." His followers were hyped. He live-streamed rehearsals. Against all advice, all warnings, and possibly the pleading of 3 deeply unnerved production interns, Micah kept the camera rolling for everything. At first, it was funny, weird, aesthetic. People loved it. He'd read a line. The camera would flicker. Lights would hum. Someone swore they saw a shadow in the mirror behind him, moving before he did. One clip went viral, Micah, alone in costume, pacing the stage and practicing his lines. A voice, not his whispers. "It's your turn now." Micah didn't hear it, but the viewers did. And that's when things turned. 3 days before the show, the live stream feed warped. The stage lights went crimson. The crown on the prop table cracked down the center. The soundboard began playing soft applause on loop too slow, too deliberate. Someone in the chat wrote, "The play is clapping back." Then the stream cut out. Opening night still happened. At least, that's what the dozen audience members in attendance claim. There are no official records, no programs, no credits, only testimony. Each person reported a nearly identical experience. The lights dimmed. The monologue began. The air turned hot. And then, silence. Not an ending, an absorption. They said it felt like the walls closed in, not physically, but emotionally. Like watching someone walk into their own funeral wearing a smile they didn't mean. When asked what happened to Micah, no one could agree. Some said he burst into flames. Others swore he vanished in a blink. One elderly woman claimed she saw him crowned by shadows and walking off stage, not into the wings, but into the curtain itself. Regardless, Micah has not been seen since. His TikTok remains active, sort of. Once a week, at exactly 2:13 a.m., a new clip appears. Just 2 seconds. Always the same line, whispered. The king remembers you. Experts claim it's a bot. His fans aren't so sure. The theater has been closed since... The building still stands, wrapped in scaffolding and legal red tape, though construction crews refuse to go inside. One worker quit on the spot, claiming the blueprints had changed mid-measurement. This wall wasn't here yesterday, he muttered. And that door leads somewhere that isn't. And through it all, the script spreads, like a virus or an idea. Copies show up in school libraries, scrawled on bathroom walls, emailed anonymously to amateur playwrights with subject lines, like "It's your cue." There are rumors of an encrypted online archive one that updates itself, where the script writes back. And those who speak the lines, they report dreams, always the same: a stage, an empty house, and a velvet curtain that never opens, just rustles, waiting. Because even when the cast vanishes, the audience never leaves. Eventually, the town stopped trying to fight the theater. They stopped hammering boards over its doors, stopped commissioning exorcists and insurance adjusters, and stopped debating whether King of Ashes should ever be spoken aloud again. Because by now, the answer was clear. It never left. It had simply become more polite about its presence. By 2025, the Merowick Playhouse was technically condemned, legally uninhabitable, and spiritually considered occupied by anyone who'd ever dared to whisper in its wings. And yet, somehow, the front doors were found open every few weeks. Not pried, not broken, just unlocked. And inside, the velvet curtain remained perfectly drawn. No dust, no mold, no rot, even though every other surface in the building showed its age like bruised fruit. That curtain still glowed with a faint sheen, like it was watching, or winking, or maybe both. Locals claimed to hear music some nights, strings tuning, soft applause, a creak of boards as if an invisible cast were pacing through a full run. Ghost light or not. The stage remained dimly lit by something not quite electricity. Eventually, no one dared go in, until Riley Knoll, age 17, daughter of a long-gone stagehand, and proud owner of the last functioning camcorder in town, decided to sneak in and make a doc. Her goal: capture the myth, film the infamous trapdoor, maybe even catch a whisper. She wore headphones, kept sage in her pocket, and carried a toy crown ironically perched on her head, like a halo with bad posture. She left at 2:03, visibly shaken, said nothing for a week, then posted the footage. It went viral. The curtain moved on its own, not flapping, not breeze shifting, moving. A slow, parting draw like an invitation. And behind it, nothing. Not a stage, not a wall, just depth. A kind of blackness so total it looked textured. Viewers described it as the color you see when your dreams forget to load. Some said they saw something move inside it. A figure. A crown. A throne made of the audience's own fear. Riley turned off comments, took the video down, disappeared for a while. When she returned, she'd cut her hair, stopped wearing makeup, and spoke only in stage metaphors. The curtain's not there to hide, she told a local podcaster. It's there to hold. Hold what? No one asked. Because now, people understood King of Ashes wasn't just a cursed play. It wasn't a story, or a ghost, or even a metaphor for our need to control narrative. It was a container, a vessel for belief, fear, performance. It fed on attention the way a flame feeds on air. And the more people watched, the more real it became. It's why the script always changed. It wasn't evolving. It was listening. The final documented incident came quietly. No live streams, no screaming curtains, just a letter, found on the Playhouse steps one rainy Thursday morning. Typed, dated, signed only with a single crown symbol. It read, "The cast is complete. The king has taken his final bow. For now. Until someone forgets, until someone says the lines again, until a new voice steps into the light. The script waits. The fire listens." The city left the letter on display in a locked case inside the Merowick Museum, right next to the taxidermied raven, right under a motion sensor light that turns on by itself every Thursday at 2:13 Now, just in case you're wondering, yes, the trapdoor is still there, and yes, it still opens. And now, let's dim the lights, the curtains drawn, the applause fades, and all that remains is the echo of breath of lines spoken, again and again, in the dark corners of stages and bedrooms and basements. Perhaps you're wondering if this was all real, or if it was just a story, told well, with flickering lights and whispers between the scenes. But maybe it doesn't matter, because sometimes a tale doesn't need to be true to leave something behind. Maybe just a flicker, a word, the sound of velvet stirring when you swear you're alone. So sleep well tonight, and if your dreams happen to lead you to a stage with no audience and only one line left to say, make sure you say it slowly and mean it.